While people are arriving, let me just welcome you to our Wow Wednesday series of travel talks. Today, we'll be giving you tools for preparing for when the unexpected happens, whether it's surprise injuries, natural disasters, political unrest. Uncertainty is a big word we're hearing this year. And so we're talking about travel insurance and memberships that provide assistance in a crisis, whether a medical crisis or a security crisis. We're going to be talking about the tools that will give you peace of mind when you travel. I also want to take this moment to thank the sponsor of our Wow Wednesday series of travel talks, MedJet. MedJet is a global medical transport, travel security, and crisis response membership. I've had a membership myself ever since my kids were little babies. If you should end up hospitalized far from home, MedJet will get you back home to the doctor you trust and the hospital near your family, which can save you many tens of thousands of dollars. MedJet also offers crisis protection. If you're far from home and you feel that your safety and security may be threatened because of a political threat or a terrorist attack, a natural disaster, they'll come to the rescue. Plus, MedJet is making this hour with you possible, so thank you, MedJet. Now, I think everybody has arrived in our Zoom. So again, welcome. We're so glad all of you can join us. Today, we're talking about how to minimize your travel risk, both financial and medical. And we're excited for our expert guests to explain it all for you and also simplify it for you. First, let me introduce you to our executive editor at WendyPerrin.com, my right hand, Brooke Wilkinson. She's coming to us from Northern California. Brooke has traveled to more than 50 countries, everything from backpacking solo in Asia to elaborate wow list trips. And in fact, I gave Brooke her first job back at Condé Nast Traveler magazine. I hired her more than 2 decades ago. Anyway, Brooke, please tell us what we need to know right now.
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, hi, everyone. And I recognize many of the names in our participant box, so many of you know us already, but if you're new to WendyPerrin.com, welcome. And let me just tell you a little bit about what we do. We're a website that helps people plan trips in multiple ways. Wendy and I are journalists, as she mentioned. We write articles about travel, but we're also kind of travel matchmakers. We connect travelers with experts who plan private, custom-tailored trips. Many of those planners are on our WOW list of trusted travel experts, which you'll find on our website if you go to the black menu bar. And when you contact those experts via our website, we guide you through our unique WOW approach to trip planning, which is we've designed based on the decades of experience that Wendy and I have watching people plan trips. We help you avoid the common pitfalls and get really the best trip that's possible. We also are answering travelers' questions every day through our Ask Wendy questionnaire. So that's also on our website, as you can find if you have questions. A few housekeeping details. I already see our Q&A box is active, so make sure to open that box up. Many of you submitted questions already, and we'll be trying to get to as many of those as we can tonight. If you have questions that come up over the course of the next hour, drop them into that Q&A box, and we'll try to answer them as well. If we don't get to your question tonight, write to questions@WendyPerrin.com, and we'll answer you that way. And also watch that box. Our colleague Flory is in there dropping in links, which will be helpful to you. Okay, back to you, Wendy.
Thank you, Brooke. And now let me introduce our expert guests tonight, two of the most knowledgeable people we know to help guide you through the decisions that will give you peace of mind before your next trip. So with us tonight, we have the best travel insurance guru we know, Stan Sandberg. Stan, thank you for joining us. Stan is the founder of travelinsurance.com. I've turned many travelers onto this website and they love how it works. You input your trip dates, trip cost, your age, and other variables, and the site generates side-by-side comparisons of the insurance policies that best fit your needs. Also joining us today is the wonderful Sherry Howell of MedJet, the medical evacuation and security response membership program that I just described and that I've been a member of since my kids were babies. So Stan and Sherry, thank you so much for being here with us. I'd like to start with, well, Brooke, why don't you first of all share with us the real life story of the medical emergency that happened to you and your family last year in Europe?
Yeah, so I've been covering travel insurance for many years as a journalist. This was the first time I got firsthand experience in filing a claim, which I guess in the end everyone's survived, and so in the end it was useful work experience. At one point, I even told my husband, as he's little flash forward, he's in an ER, and I'm texting him, "Can you make sure you take a picture of yourself? I might use this for the newsletter." Which he did. So what happened is my husband fell off a mountain bike on a backcountry gravel road on a remote island in the Azores, which themselves are in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So we were kind of out in the middle of nowhere, not exactly a convenient place to get hurt. The first thing was that our private guide who was taking us biking was enormously helpful. He was really our first line of defense. He got us to urgent care on the island. He translated with the front desk staff who spoke only Portuguese. Even many of the nurses didn't speak any English, understandably. He even brought me some food when I was waiting for my husband to be seen, and I missed lunch, and he went out and got me something to eat. So he was great support right there on the ground immediately. My husband Ryan saw a doctor in that first clinic, had x-rays taken, and then he was escorted they insisted on ambulance escort to the ferry to go to a second island where there was a specialist to see him. So we had another set of x-rays done there, saw an orthopedist. And because he wasn't admitted to the hospital at any point during this process, we were responsible for paying the bills for his care. So I'm kind of thinking, okay, I hope I got enough. Do I need cash? Do I need a credit card? The grand total for that, so we're talking an urgent care and then an ER, ambulances, a ferry ride, was $165 for all of that care. Kind of shocking what medical care costs in other countries versus the US. So in the meantime, in addition to all of that, we still weren't sure whether Ryan was going to need surgery, what the outcome was going to be of this specialist who was going to see him. So my mother and son and I were all traveling together. We all decided to follow my husband to this second island, not sure what the outcome was going to be. And this is where our trip planner came in and saved the day. I booked the trip through someone on the WOW list, and he stepped in once he heard that there are kind of these logistics. On the one hand, I'm trying to figure out what the doctors are saying and what they're advising. On the other hand, I'm thinking, where are we going to sleep tonight? And how, if he's going to a second island, I still want to see him. I'm worried about him. So our trip planner stepped in, figured out exactly where the hospital was. I had no idea, where are we going? Where's this hospital? He figured out where the hospital was, found a hotel nearby, with walking distance, got us tickets on the ferry, and took care of all of those logistics so that I could focus on the medical decisions that we needed to make, which was, again, enormously helpful. In the end, the Portuguese orthopedist told Ryan, you don't need surgery right now, but really you should see a doctor as soon as you get back to the US. And before we were getting all the way home back here to California, we were stopping in New York. So it turned out the only way we could see an orthopedist, we tried an urgent care and they turned us away. It happened to be a Sunday, the first day we were back from the Azores. And so we ended up at the ER, unfortunately. I didn't want to use up emergent medicine, but there was no other way to see a doctor. The bill that time, to see a doctor and get x-rays taken, was $3,000. But because I had planned, I had paid for an insurance policy that covered me until the day that I got home. I covered the entire period, not just the time that I was out of the country, but the entire length of my trip away from home. So that $3,000 bill was covered by our travel insurance, which was a great relief to both of us. I purchased Travelex insurance because that's the company that Wendy and I have received the best feedback about. In my experience, there was an online claim form. I filled that out, explained what happened to my husband, kind of in no more detail than I just did here. They didn't want to know what kind of bike was it? How were the brakes? Was it in good condition? What was the road like? I uploaded the receipts that I had from the different services. And several weeks later, I got a check in the mail. There was no follow-up questions, no requests for additional paperwork. So I was actually surprised, I have to say, by how easy it all was. So as I said, it covered that large bill from the ER in New York, $165 for the Portuguese medical care. We spent $50 on supplies at a pharmacy. He needed a sling and, some gauze and things like that. And even the cost of those new hotel rooms on the second island, the travel insurance covered that as well. Not just, interestingly, not just for the room I was sharing with my husband and my son, but also for my mom's room, because she was on the trip with us. So she, came along with us. So it was really informative in the end, and my husband's arm has healed by now, so I can say it was a useful experience. Happy to answer any other questions you have about that. But in the meantime, drop those in the Q&A, and I'm going to throw some of the questions that you submitted ahead of time to our experts. So first of all, let's see. One of you wrote, please explain the different types of coverage for travel insurance and which ones are the most important to always include. So really, let's start with the basics. I think of insurance as serving two purposes, both financial. It protects the money you've already paid for a trip, and it covers any potential future costs, whether that's because you got sick or injured, or you had to cancel, you have to interrupt your trip, you need to run home because a parent is ill or something like that. Sam, is there anything you want to add to that kind of basic, what's the coverage of travel insurance?
Well, Brooke, you've done a great job. So first of all, I want to say thank you to you, Brooke and Wendy, for having me again, and nice to see you, Sherry. And yeah, the way to think about travel insurance really is about sort of the two sort of types of protection. It's the protection before you leave on your trip, protecting the investment in the trip. So if you've booked a trip and it's non-refundable and you've prepaid for a lot of the trip costs, a travel insurance plan is going to protect that with a trip cancellation coverage. Trip cancellation coverage is going to reimburse you for your non-refundable trip costs if you have to cancel before you've left on your trip. For a wide variety of reasons. The most common are getting sick before you go and you can't travel, or a family member is sick, or God forbid is who passes away. That's some of the most standard reasons why people would need to cancel. But there are many more reasons. So it can run from the unexpected extension of a school year. There are work reasons which would give you the ability to cancel. Natural disasters, and when you mentioned, terrorist events in your destination during the hurricane season. So there's a wide range of reasons why you would find yourself in a situation where you couldn't go on the trip, and so a travel insurance plan will protect that investment. But that all happens before you actually leave on your trip. So that's if you end up not going. The day you leave on your trip, a travel insurance plan is going to kind of switch to providing you protection and coverage if something happens to you while you're traveling. So that can range from losing your bags, finding yourself in a extended trip delay because of the airlines. It might be because or your bags are delayed for an extended period of time. There's going to be coverages in a plan to protect those things. And then probably most importantly, Brooke, what you just described as the unexpected accident or illness while you're traveling. If you find yourself having to go to urgent care or to the hospital, for the most part, you're going to probably have to pay for those costs while you're there. A travel insurance plan will reimburse you for those costs. So again, the unexpected illness or sickness. In extreme situations where you may not be able to get the help you need in the location that you're at, travel insurance plan is usually going to have emergency medical evacuation as well. And that will generally evacuate you to the nearest medical facility that can treat you. And so there's somewhat of a limitation in the evacuation coverage in a travel insurance plan, and that's where Sherry's products will come in, and she'll talk about that in a second. But there are a number of other benefits that you'll find in a travel insurance plan that, again, protect you from the financial burden of an unexpected disruption to your trip. And then lastly, there's a feature that some people overlook. It's called trip interruption coverage. So if while you're traveling, you find yourself in one of these situations and you can't continue on the trip interruption coverage, kind of like the trip cancellation coverage, will reimburse you for the unused portion of your trip. So you really can, really have a wide range of protections in a single policy that you can buy. You know, the day you book your trip is the day you should be thinking about insuring that trip.
Thanks, Dan. And so Sherry, yeah, if you can tell us a bit about what MedJet adds to that coverage.
In its simplest form, we always say that travel insurance gets you to the nearest hospital if you're ill or injured that is capable of treating you, pays the hospital bills. But once you're there, it won't move you to a hospital at home just because you prefer to be, treated at home. And if you're looking at a sustained injury or sustained um, hospital stay, 99% of people really want to be moved to their hospital at home so they're around their family. And that's what MedJet does. It's a private membership program that you join. And if you are hospitalized anywhere in the world, we get you moved to the hospital of your choice in your home country. Most people choose home, but sometimes something happens and they want to go to a center of excellence somewhere else, spinal surgery center or cancer center, like they've discovered something unfortunate. And then our security memberships, those, travel insurance comes with a limited amount of response and coverage for things like terrorism, but our membership is a 24/7 security line that you can call anytime you feel your security is threatened. Kidnapping for ransom, it covers political threat. Been getting so many calls with so many riots everywhere. It covers if you're the victim of a violent crime in a foreign country. I wouldn't wish dealing with the police in a foreign language, especially if you've been traumatized on anyone. So it's a higher level and a more immediate response than what travel insurance typically provides. They'll usually come into play if there's a government action, like a government issued evacuation order, but our memberships allow you to call the 24/7 crisis line anytime you don't feel safe. So we always recommend that people have travel insurance. I just got back from a trip and was telling Stan that, I bought a policy from WendyPerrin.com. We always recommend that you have at least 50,000 in medical coverage and medical evacuation that gets you to the closest hospital. Once you're there, that's kind of where we come in. So it's in addition to, not in replacement of travel insurance.
Yeah,
And I'll
oh, go ahead, Stan.
I was just going to add that of course I purchased travel insurance for all of my travel. You wouldn't expect anything else, right? But for the last I guess 6 or 7 years, I've also purchased MedJet annual plans for my family and me, which again is that added security of knowing that if God forbid something were to happen while we're traveling, it's not just getting myself or my family to the closest hospital that could treat the situation, but actually be able to get back home to my hospital where I live. So it doesn't really overlap with the travel insurance plan, and it adds again a layer of security and comfort in traveling that that I will continue to do that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
also not insurance, it's a private membership program. And
That's
so if you ever need the services, all you ever pay is your membership fee. There's no claim form process. There's no, if you require a transport, if it's a $200,000 transport, we pay 100% of that transport bill.
One listener wrote in, what does emergency assistance cover over and above travel insurance? And do you still need emergency assistance if your insurance policy says it offers medical assistance for travel? So just to kind of to add to what Sherry just said, the emergency part is being covered by your travel insurance, right? And that's often, as happened with me, you're just looking to the people around you to help you figure out how to get to the care you
Yeah.
need. So that's an ER, an urgent care, something like that. And then you figure out how to get that paid for and reimbursed afterwards. And many medical policies or comprehensive travel insurance policies will cover that evacuation to the nearest acceptable medical facility.
Yeah.
What MedJet does is the next step of getting you home or to your hospital of choice, wherever that may be.
Yeah, and I would just add that yes, in comprehensive travel insurance plans, you're always going to have a global travel assistance number. Many of them are reachable by WhatsApp or text or collect call, but there will be emergency services available, and typically they will have emergency services that specialize in, or will have people who specialize in the region that you're traveling in, because navigating the medical system in South America is going to be very different than navigating the medical system in the Azores or in in Nepal, or so you want to have that specialist there. I think when you're certainly for the security aspects, again, Sherry's product is going to supercharge that. Again, if you are in a hospital and need to come back home, you want to go to a different hospital, Sherry's product is going to take care of that.
Now, we've gotten questions about pre-existing conditions. So if you have a medical condition, that doesn't mean that you are not eligible for insurance. You can find policies that will cover pre-existing conditions. The biggest issue there is buying at the right time. Stan, tell us what's the right time to buy.
Yeah, so for the most part, if you have a pre-existing medical condition, it's important to purchase your insurance early. So most travel insurance will, well, as a starting point, travel insurance is going to exclude losses that are a result of a pre-existing condition. That's sort of the baseline. Many policies will have a waiver of that exclusion, and to qualify for that waiver, you generally need to purchase the policy within a pretty strict time frame from when you've made the initial payment towards your trip. So the day you make the deposit, because you're thinking about a fabulous trip, even if it's a $25 deposit or it's a $50 deposit, that's going to really mark your initial trip deposit. And so from that time, you want to then purchase your insurance. The time frame can range from 7 days from the initial deposit date to 21 days from the initial deposit date. There are some plans, although very limited, which will require you to purchase your policy within 24 hours of making your final trip payment. So, many times you're making a deposit and then you're making payments along a schedule, sometimes months, it's, 3 months, it's 6 months. And then, when you're closest to the trip, you would make your final payment. There are some specialized plans that will allow you to purchase the policy at the final trip payment date and still qualify for the pre-existing condition waiver. The other distinction that's important to look at, because not all plans are the same, some plans will define a pre-existing condition as this is generally speaking, if you have a condition which required you to visit a doctor, or you had a change in prescription or medication, or you had to seek advice from a doctor about that particular condition. If that occurs within 90 days of your purchase date, or the effective date of the policy, which is 1 day after you make the purchase, but let's call it the day you purchase the plan, they will look back 90 days and say, was there anything with this medical condition that you had to, you had to something where you had to have a change of medication, or you had to seek, you had to go to a doctor for that. Then that would be defined as a pre-existing condition. Some plans will look back as long as 180 days. So again, if you have a pre-existing condition, then it's important just to understand what the terms are in that policy, so you can get you can get the right coverage. So if, again, just like talking about this distinction a little more, if you have a heart condition and you went to your cardiologist and you went 180 days ago, and but if that was all that occurred, you actually could buy a plan that defines a pre-existing condition as something that happened within the last 90 days. So that might not be a pre-existing condition in one plan, but it's a pre-existing condition in another plan. And I know that maybe sounds a little bit complicated for this conversation, but again, if it's an issue, pick up the phone, talk to an agent at whether it's a comparison marketplace like travelinsurance.com or directly with the carrier, because it's one of those things that it's not as complicated once you get the expert on the line, but it's very important to make sure you understand what the terms are.
Yeah, they vary wildly. We don't have any pre-existing conditions exclusions under age 75. Like you can buy it at any point. We don't ask any questions. Over age 75, we ask a few health questions, but once you're a member, then it doesn't matter.
And we'll get to that. A lot of people have questions about the age cutoffs for policies. But going back to the idea of kind of a deadline of when to buy a policy, Stan, there are some other benefits, advantages of buying a policy as soon as you've made that first trip payment. Can you name those?
Sure. And we call them time-sensitive benefits. So it's again tied to the date that you put that first deposit down. There's a feature that I think has become much more popular in the last couple of years, especially in the last year, called cancel for any reason. And this is has to do with trip cancellation. Some policies will have interrupt for any reason. So it's the same concept, but when you are traveling, if you want to abandon the trip for any reason, that's an option. But these plans, again, require you to purchase the plan within that same time frame. So it might be 7 days from the initial trip deposit date. It could be 15 days or it could be 21 days, depending on the plan. But for cancel for any reason, this is generally it's not an inexpensive upgrade to a plan, but for the most flexibility in being able to cancel, it's one that many people are considering now, especially with, as Wendy said, the uncertainty in the world today. Cancel for any reason will allow you to cancel for any reason. And that's really any reason that's not already listed in the plan. If it's listed in the plan, you're covered. If it's not listed in the plan, that's where cancel for any reason comes in to play. And typically the cancel for any reason is not going to reimburse you for 100% of your trip costs. It's going to reimburse you. Some plans are 50% reimbursement. Some plans are 60% reimbursement. Most plans are 75% reimbursement.
And another time-sensitive bit of coverage, I believe, is default of a supplier on the trip. Is that right? So if a company that is serving you in some way, whether that's, your a cruise line that you're taking or a guide company that you're going out with for a couple of days, if they financially default, you can get your money back, but only if you've purchased the insurance soon after that first.
Yes. And that one is also tied to the purchasing within this time frame of your initial trip deposit date. There are some other time sort of restrictions associated with that too, but that may be too much detail right now. But yes, I think the headline here is when you've made that first deposit on a trip, that's when you should be thinking about the travel insurance and going into the market to purchase it.
Yeah. One listener asked, do I have to include my airfare when getting a quote for travel insurance? My feeling about that is it kind of depends. If it's airfare on a regional airline in Southeast Asia, and if I don't take this trip, I'm not likely to fly that airline ever again, then I want to include that. If it's a flight on United and I'm flying them every few months, and I know if I get a credit, I know there's a good chance I'll use it, then I'm not going to insure that. But I know there are also some specifics about making sure that you insure all the costs of a trip in order to get coverage for pre-existing conditions.
Yes, exactly. And then that's one of the main reasons why you would want to include all of your non-refundable trip costs, just for that. Many plans require you, and same with cancel for any reason, there's a requirement that you insure 100% of your trip costs. But again, if you're looking at a plan and you're not, you don't need a pre-existing condition waiver, and you're not thinking about cancel for any reason, then you can insure as much or as little of your trip costs in a travel insurance plan. So, there are some people who actually like the post-departure benefits. So the emergency medical coverage, the travel delay, the baggage protection, all of the things that will kick into gear once you've left on your trip. Some people are looking just for those types of benefits because they know they're going on this trip no matter what. I don't need trip cancellation. I just need the post-departure benefits. In those instances, you can just enter 0 trip costs into a quote form on travelinsurance.com or others, and you can get quoted a travel insurance plan that's going to exclude the trip cancellation piece, but give you all of the post-departure benefits.
And we have a couple what ifs that people wrote in. Will travel insurance protect me if the airline cancels my flight? What if I miss my flight? Will travel insurance cover a hotel then? And what about needing additional medicines? I guess if someone's traveling and needs extra medicine. Stan, can you answer those?
Yeah, so it depends on the circumstances in most cases. If if again, if if the airline cancels a flight, there's some very clear sort of reasons why a travel insurance plan would cover you. If it's because of a mechanical issue with the aircraft, if it's because of weather-related delays, if you're traveling to the airport and you're you're unfortunately in a traffic accident, and you can't ultimately get to the airport, that's going to be a reason why you would have coverage. And so it really depends on the circumstances around it. But again, typically the probably the most common thing is that you're at the airport and a flight gets delayed. The airline delays the flight. The trip delay coverage in a travel insurance plan is going to be, I guess, in lack of a better way of putting it, maybe a little more lenient in terms of providing coverage while you're in that delay. So it might provide, food reimbursement, internet service, transportation costs if the delay is such that you have to stay the night, accommodations costs, but the overall coverage would be limited to a sort of a per day per person amount, and typically travel delay coverage, the total limit is generally somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500. So it's there are some limitations there, but again, it really depends on the circumstances. If you miss your flight, that again, there's got to be a reason that is described in the plan's documents for that coverage to be in effect.
Now, we got a lot of questions about annual policies, which I think has been something that's growing in the marketplace. Used to be that travel insurance policies were for each trip, but there are more options to buy a policy that will cover you on all of your travel for the entire year. Stan, can you tell us what the pros and cons are of an annual policy?
Sure. So an annual plan is great for someone who's traveling maybe 4 times a year consistently, 3 or 4 times a year. It's typically designed more for the post-departure benefits of the plan. There's more limited trip cancellation coverage, and that trip cancellation will be a cumulative limit. So if you have an annual plan and they provide, let's call it $5,000 of trip cancellation coverage, and on your first trip of the year, you have to cancel and you use the 5,000, then you've exhausted that, that particular piece of coverage, but you will still have the post-departure benefits in the plan. it really is sort of a, it's one of those things you want to do the sort of cost benefit analysis. If you're, again, if you're taking multiple trips a year, it might work out in your favor. But again, the options may be a little bit more limited. I think
All right. I mean, the weekend trip to Paris gives you have the same coverage for that trip as you do for the, budget busting 50th anniversary African safari that you're taking your whole family on. So that
yeah. And quite frankly, an annual membership like MedJet, I think that is, again, a very compelling option. And that's buy it once and you're covered for the year.
Yeah, Sherry, can you talk about you do have both an annual and a per trip option, and what are kind of is there a break-even point when you recommend that people should take out the annual membership?
Yeah, ours come in 8-day, 15-day, 21-day, and 30-day. The 8-day starts at $99 for an individual. Break even would just be 2 trips if you're going to take more than 2 trips. Plus, most people buy it for the international coverage. They're doing a big international trip, but if you're an annual member, it works domestically too. And we have a lot of people that go on their international trip, nothing happens, they come home, they get whacked by a snowboarder in Vail or slip at a wedding 3 states over, and it can be just as discombobulating, being hospitalized someplace 3 states away as it can be 3,000 miles away. So annuals cover anytime you travel more than 150 miles from your home. But with the annual, I had a question just with the annual policies for insurance versus the short terms, because I travel all the time, but I always do short terms because I have found that the medical limits on the annual policies are typically lower unless I'm, kind of missing the policies that do have, because I really feel more comfortable with at least 50,000 in medical, and I don't seem to have found an annual that covers that.
Yeah, that's right. Again, the use case, is a little bit more specialized. I'd say that, I've been in this business for well over a decade, and we've never seen the annual plan get the kind of traction we've thought, and we've had providers who have tried to create different sort of versions of the plan. When trip cancellation was introduced to the annual plans, we thought that would be a very popular option, and it hasn't taken off, and I think it's because it's a cumulative limit, and typically those limits are not, again, there's a use case for it, but if you are looking to maximize your medical coverage and the evac piece and other coverage limits, a single trip plan is still going to be able to do that for you.
Another topic that was very popular among our listeners was credit card provided insurance. Many premium credit cards do offer some insurance benefits. And based on my reading of those policies, it seems like it's not really a reason to get one of those cards, but if you already have one, if you decide the annual fee is worth it for the other benefits, the ancillary benefits, then you should know what you've got, and you may want to add to that coverage and beef it up a little bit. Stan, what's your take?
Yeah, I think the very high-end premium cards are going to provide a relatively decent package of travel insurance embedded, but you're still going to find typically fewer covered reasons for cancellation. The coverage limits are going to be lower than what you can find in even the standard plans if you go to the marketplace. And you may find more exclusions in those plans. Again, those are designed as sort of generic one size fits all. And so it's also important to know the differences between the various credit cards. Is your coverage in your credit card only when, for the amounts you purchase on that credit card, or is it for a full trip? If it's only for the stuff you purchase on the credit card, you may still need to then get a second policy for your other trip costs if you're using a different credit card. So again, from a also sort of managing a claim through that process, I personally feel more comfortable managing that through a travel insurance company rather than my credit card company, even though the credit card company is outsourcing ultimately to a travel insurance provider somewhere. But as long as you understand what you're getting with your credit card, it might fit your needs. Otherwise, again, going and being able to compare and find the right plan for your trip is the better route.
Yeah, absolutely. And me personally, it's like I have 3 high-end credit cards that all come with some semblance of trip insurance, but it's typically the financial aspect of it. None of them come with medical. So a lot of times I'll do what Stan talked about earlier, and I will purchase everything on one of those cards, depending on which airline I'm flying on. And rely on that trip cancellation, trip interruption, those components of it, but I will still double up with a low, trip coverage cost, full-blown travel insurance policy for the medical and the evac. So, I mean, there's so many different ways that you can combine this, and I've looked at so many of them, but I still always default back to the travel insurance for, at bare minimum, the medical.
Yeah. And one listener asked about the American Express Global Assist program, how that compares to MedJet's Horizon plan. When I read through that policy, it sounded to me like American Express is going to determine whether the local medical facility that you've been taken to is adequate. And if they believe it is to serve whatever needs you have medically, they will leave you there. If they don't believe it's an adequate medical facility, that's when they will come in and transport you. That's different from MedJet. Am I right, Sherry?
For sure. I have a platinum card. When I first started working at MedJet, I called and asked them specifically, like, what happens if we're going to South America, what happens if my husband falls off a horse because he wants to go to a gaucho ranch and he's going to fall off the horse. And they confirmed for me that if he needed emergency evac, it would get us to Buenos Aires, most likely to Buenos Aires. But then once we're in Buenos Aires, it was at their discretion whether he needed to be moved further. And you really got to prove medical necessity. He can only be treated at this one hospital at home before they'll let you move just because you want to move. That's why MedJet's been in business for 30 years. So, all of those things that the credit cards provide are actually underwritten by an insurance carrier. Insurance is regulated state by state. And they're all, it's all pretty on par, and they all have medical necessity, nearest adequate hospital caveats. So that card, I've secret shopped all of those and I own 3 of them. So.
Stan, a number of people asked about Medicare coverage and how that works. I don't believe Medicare covers you when you're traveling internationally. Is that right?
That's right. I believe there are some ways to do it through Medicare, but the standard Medicare is not going to provide coverage overseas. And so, again, travel insurance becomes a sort of a critical piece of the international travel equation here. It's no surprise that probably the biggest demographic and buying market for travel insurance are retirees. They have the time to travel. They have the the disposable income to travel. They understand the concept of insurance and protecting a trip. And so again, using travel insurance as a way to provide that coverage overseas is really critical.
Sherry, I just noticed there's a follow-up question in the Q&A box. Trish says that with Amex Global Assist, she was asking about non-medical events, it just moved to someone else, such as political unrest, etc. Are you familiar with their benefits toward that.
Yeah, and again, most of them will offer some semblance of assistance, and it generally requires a hard trigger, which is, a government issued mandate or course of action. Um, I'm not 100% familiar on a case by case basis what it would provide, but again, all of those things are underwritten by an insurance carrier at some point or another. And those are the same caveats that we find in the travel insurance policies. They may offer some reaction, they may offer reimbursement for evacuation in the instance of something like Israel. Do they offer boots on the ground security response if that's what's necessary, and true evacuation if that's what's necessary? Probably not as robust as what a Medjet Horizon membership would offer.
One listener said, I'm moving from the US to Germany in May. Will I still be eligible for these services? My understanding is most insurance policies are just for US residents.
The trip cancellation policies are. If it's a temporary move, there may be travel medical policies that would be appropriate. Typically a travel medical, there are policies, and it's really just the medical coverage, and you can actually even select the deductible you want. You can select the coverage limits you want. But they will not work in your home country of residence and citizenship. So if it's a temporary move, it's sort of akin to someone coming to the US on an HB1 visa or a student visa. There are options in the travel medical world to cover them while they're here.
Yeah, same for us. We have Expatriate 365. If you're going to maintain a residence here or your residency here, and your main concern is being able to get back to the US or Canada or Mexico, depending on where you reside, then yeah, you can get an Expat 365 that will, if you're hospitalized, get you moved here.
But a Medjet membership is only available to residents of the US.
Canada, and Mexico, right? And then you would be turned to whichever was your country of residence.
Sherry, listener asked, does Medjet coverage include cruises to Antarctica? Can you explain what would happen if you get sick on a cruise? And
the number one destination, right? Everybody asks this. So the way that Antarctica works is, if you're we don't pick up from cruise ships. Nobody does. That is strictly the purview of a decision between the captain of the ship, because you're probably in international waters. And most likely it is a local Coast Guard, or for Antarctica specifically, it's going to be the captain that determines how sick you are, what's necessary, whether the ship needs to divert, because there are no hospitals on Antarctica proper. I was just reading about a case study the other day, not us, but just in general, and the way that everybody, insurance, like all rescue organizations, handle Antarctica. And there was a person there were two people on one ship that were really, really sick, and the ship diverted, caught with another ship that was going back to the Chilean side, to Punta Arenas. But 99.99% of the time, the ship's captain, and all the whatever the most expedient way to get you to either Ushuaia, which now has a hospital, or Punta Arenas if you went out the Chilean side. I think if you're really far over, they might actually even take you to New Zealand. I've not heard of that, but I was reading that was one of the options that the captain was contemplating. Now, once you get to Ushuaia or Punta Arenas, that's where you would be stabilized. That's where Medjet would get you moved to your home hospital. But all of those emergent services, and the same for cruises in general. There's not anybody except probably a local Coast Guard that can do an airlift at sea. They don't land on the ship, and depending on how big or small the ship is, what the weather is, they may be lowering a basket. My husband actually used to run the search and rescue school for the Coast Guard. And it really is up to the ship's captain and the local emergency services, how you're going to get to land, how you're going to get to that nearest hospital. So I hope that answers a double bump on cruises in Antarctica, but you don't want to get stuck in Punta Arenas or Ushuaia either. But it really is going to be a confluence of what the captain and the medical team on the ship and all of the emergency services, and sometimes the shipping or the owner, the cruise company, gets involved, and they'll decide what the most expedient method is. But companies like MedJet, none of us can promise to go airlift somebody out of, the Drake Passage or the Beagle Canal. Like, you just can't.
Stan, you mentioned earlier that there will usually be a customer service number, an emergency number that you can call. And one listener asked, how do I ensure travel insurance includes the cost of a helicopter rescue from a hiking trail without having to call a 1-800 number to ensure coverage? Like, basically, if you don't have access to call someone, if you're out in the wilderness, what do you do? And similarly, what information should I gather prior to a trip to know how to reach emergency medical assistance if it's needed while traveling?
Well, I'll start with the last part of that question first, because it's the easy part, which is your travel insurance confirmation of coverage and documents are going to have all of the emergency contacts listed for you. So, and how to, whether they've got an option to do it by WhatsApp or text or phone call. So the information will be there, and you just need to print that out and bring it with you. But there's like a travel insurance plan is not going to guarantee you a helicopter evac from a remote location. Again, the evacuation coverage is going to be more in line of getting you to a medical facility that can treat your, whatever your medical emergency is. There are some specialized, what I would call more search and rescue type offerings. So if you were, let's say, for instance, hiking to the base of Mount Everest, and I'm not suggesting, you're hiking to the top of Mount Everest, but if you were, or maybe Kilimanjaro, there are companies that would provide site rescue, if you will, and those are a little bit more specialized, but you're not going to find that in a standard travel insurance plan.
Right. And a lot of times the tour company, the guides, a lot of those local outfitters, if you will, they already know who the closest evac to the local hospital is going to be. And for national parks, a lot of that search and rescue is actually provided by the national park or provided by I know the Cascade Mountains, sometimes it's the Air Force Base that does it for training. But they're always going to call like whoever the local authorities are. So whatever the outfitter is, I would check with and see what their emergency thing. And if there is a cost associated, correct me if I'm wrong, but Stan, that would be the emergent transport that is provided to the nearest hospital. That is what the true medevac, if you require a medical evacuation, and emergency services have reached you and have qualified that, like, oh my gosh, this person's really got to be airlifted to a hospital. That is what that medevac is actually for. Like my husband falling off a horse at a gaucho ranch.
Yes, that's correct.
No, we can't end this. Oh, did you?
But I was sorry. I was just gonna, just clarify. But it's not a guaranteed helicopter rescue. It might be an ambulance, or it might be, on horseback, if that were the only way you could do it. But no, it's.
Yeah. We can't end this hour without talking about age cutoffs. I promised we'd cover that because a lot of you wrote in. So I'd love both of you to talk about what is possible as you get into your 70s and 80s. Does it become more difficult to get insurance and MedJet? Are there still options, and do you need to jump through more hoops? Stan?
Well, I'll start. Travel insurance does not have a age cutoff. So your standard trip cancellation plan, there's not a cutoff. Now, some providers may have certain products that have a cutoff. Typically, that's at 85 or 86. But other plans don't have that age limitation. But the thing to keep in mind is, like with any insurance, the cost of the insurance is based on a number of variables, one of which is the traveler's age. As you get older, you're going to pay more for insurance. That's sort of the general rule. So a travel insurance plan is going to cost more for a 85-year-old traveler than for a 35-year-old traveler. So but there's not a restriction, and you can still qualify for it.
Yeah,
Mm.
my last trip, I insured two 86-year-old little old ladies. And I think it probably ended up costing me about $80 more for one of theirs than mine did. So you know, it was available. And it was a little bit more expensive, but still not absurd. For MedJet, under age 75 is our regular, annual membership or short-term membership. We don't ask any health questions. You sign up, you name, address, phone number, date of birth, and you're off. Over age 75, it's called our Diamond membership. It is only available annually. And you do need to fill out a medical questionnaire. We ask about 6 questions, really just looking for, is there something really, should this person be traveling? And then we ask, there's a form that your doctor signs off on, so long as you've seen the doctor within the last year, kind of like they won't sign a prescription, they won't sign a form. And it asks them to kind of back up the 6 questions and sign off on the fact that you probably should be traveling.
That's another reason not to be thinking these things at the last minute, because if you need to make an appointment with your doctor and get the paperwork in, you want to do that well ahead.
Brooke,
Yeah, it can take 7 to 10 days prior to your departure or your effective date in order for us to route the forms and everything. And so Diamond is age 75 to 84, 85 plus, which we actually have we have plus members. Those are platinum members. And same form. And as you can imagine, just the cost levels do go up a little bit because the instance of use after age 75 is more significant than under.
and I would say that, the best way to see what the available options are if you are over 85 is to go to a comparison site. And, there are a number of them out there, including travelinsurance.com, but you enter your date, you enter your trip details, and it will return whatever available plans there are.
Yeah.
So if it's in the results of a search, that's available to you.
And I saw someone here in the Q&A asked about how does travel insurance compare with squaremouth.com or insuremytrip.com? And yes, as Stan said, so those are all search comparison sites that will where you feed in the parameters of your trip and it will show you policies. I'll say that I've reached out to Stan and first connected with him years ago because I just liked the interface. I found that travelinsurance.com was user-friendly and was giving me surfacing the information that was most relevant to me. But those are all websites you can use to compare sites from
That's correct.
Suppliers like Travelex and Generali and Allianz, and we see a lot of names. We're almost at the end of our hour, but our experts have offered to stay a little bit later. So maybe we can just kind of try and speed round through the questions we've got in this Q&A.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. Start at the top.
I think we might need to name this like the Wendy lightning round or the Brooke lightning round.
I know, we need a prize too.
See if we can stump you or the best question. Yeah. Okay, Kathleen asks, is Berkshire Hathaway one of the most pricey carriers for trip insurance? They used them in the past, they were reasonable. They wanted to charge a $32,000 premium. Gosh. Stan, any input about Berkshire?
Well, we know Berkshire very well. We don't have their products on our site right now. They're a great company, obviously a very strong name. I don't know if they're quote unquote the priciest. I think that really has a lot to do with the type of trip and the age of the travelers, the trip cost you're insuring. They do have a range of products. I know so they should have reasonably priced products. The 32,000 premium for an $85,000 trip, that seems very high to me. So but I can't speak to it specifically. It does there are put it to you this way, there are other options out there that I'm sure you will find a much lower premium for an $85,000 trip. We see a lot of $100,000 plus trips. I'm always amazed at how many people are going on these around the world, like 4-month or 6-month cruises. They're very expensive, generally in excess of $100,000, and there are a number of companies out there that underwrite and write insurance for those types of trips.
And generally speaking, you're looking at roughly 10% of the trip cost for a comprehensive policy, more if you're older, less.
Yes.
There's a range there, but it's in that roughly 10%.
Yeah.
Okay, Justin asks, could you recommend an annual travel insurance plan suitable for an 82-year-old traveler that also provides coverage for airline mileage award redeposit fees in case of trip cancellation? So I suppose if you booked your flight with miles and then you cancel the flight and you need to redeposit, many airlines will do that without a fee, but some of them do charge a fee.
Yeah, and many plans will have will cover the redeposit fees for airline miles. You can't insure the value of the airline miles in your trip costs, but there are usually mechanisms to reimburse you for those redeposit fees. I don't have a specific recommendation for an annual plan that has that. But again, a quick search should be able to surface those that have them.
And I'll say that both of these companies represented here, both travelinsurance.com and MedJet, have humans that you can talk to, which is sadly less and less possible in the world. But they both have, if you're stumped, if you have a question about a policy or a membership, you can call them up and speak to someone who can answer your questions. Joan asks, can you please address the benefits of GeoBlue?
I'm familiar with GeoBlue, but again, we don't work with them currently, and so I can't speak to the specifics about them. I believe they are just a travel medical company, not a trip cancellation. I don't know if they have trip cancellation products.
Yeah. And I always advise, if you have specific questions, call up the representatives from that particular insurance provider you're planning to use, because as Stan has said earlier, each policy and provider is going to treat a situation differently. So, imagine a scenario that got you worried, whether that's, I know my mom's not doing well and I'm worried I'm going to have to interrupt my trip midway through and come home. What's the trigger that would allow me to do that? Is it just she's not feeling well? Does she need to be admitted to a hospital, or, a doctor sign off? So you can discuss those kinds of things with representative at the.
I would add that they are a very reputable company. So, just because we're not working with them currently, but they're very reputable.
Yeah, and someone also asked about GeoBlue and Allianz. That's a name that I know well as well. I think.
Yeah. Allianz is also a very reputable company. They don't work with the comparison sites. They go direct. They're a really big company. They do a lot of the insurance on the online travel agency sites. So some of the hotels, some of the airlines. So yeah, again, very reputable company.
Marty asks, what about coverage for airlines changing your connections and refusing to reimburse you when the connections are not consistent with your other travel plans? Would that be a kind of trip delay coverage?
Again, depending on the circumstances and the reason for the change and delays. So, again, in those instances, it's best to describe a very specific situation and speak to a travel insurance agent to see if the coverage meets your example.
Susan asks, do you have to insure the full value of a trip, understanding that if there is a cancellation, you will only get coverage for what you paid for? Are there other risks with underinsuring other than the obvious? We talked a bit about the pre-existing conditions and
Yeah,
other-
it's really if you want to qualify for the pre-existing conditions, and if you're looking for cancel for any reason, that optional upgrade, you would have to insure 100% of your trip costs. But you don't, again, if you don't need either of those two, you don't have to insure the full amount of your trip.
Mhm. Justin's asking about cancel for any reason or CFAR insurance. He says that Allianz has some policies that allow travelers to cancel for almost any reason, receive up to 80% reimbursement. Are you aware of anything higher than 80% of prepaid?
I'm not aware of anything higher than 80%. I have heard some rumblings in the industry of companies thinking about trying to introduce products that go higher than 80%. I imagine the costs are going to be, ridiculously expensive for those.
Okay, that Henny says, as we talked about earlier, seen travel insurance will not cover for pre-existing medical conditions unless you buy the insurance within 14 days of booking the trip. Is that a common restriction? Yes. And is there a way around it? Stan, you said there were some that have a longer window, but basically
Some have a longer window, and then some have it tied to the final trip payment date.
Okay. Joellen would like you to explain the difference between MedJet Assist and MedJet Horizon.
MedJet Assist is our basic air medical transport membership. MedJet Horizon is the air medical transport plus the security response. If you're mainly concerned about being able to get moved to a hospital at home, then you only need MedJet Assist. If you're concerned for your safety, where you're going, then that would be MedJet Horizon. I saw a question in here too that somebody had a 5-year MedJet Horizon policy, or MedJet Assist policy, but membership, not policy. And that they were interested in upgrading it to Horizon. You can upgrade to Horizon at any point. You can start out with a MedJet Assist, and then if you eventually are going to take a trip that you're concerned for, security and you want the security response, you can upgrade it.
Okay, good to know. Amy says, I understand that annual travel insurance plans are not sold for New York residents. Is that your understanding, Sam?
Well, no. If there are some travel medical plans that are not available to New York residents, but annual plans, sort of generally speaking, wouldn't be restricted. And so, so if you're talking about an annual medical plan, then there may be that restriction in place. And that has everything to do with the fact that insurance is regulated at the state level, and New York just regulates it different than everybody else.
Trish says, I have a $40,000 trip booked and have paid a $5,000 deposit. The trip is 6 months away and I don't have to pay the balance until 45 days before I go. Basically, insurance is going to cost as much as she's paid right now. So here's my tip for you, Trish. You don't have to insure the entire cost of your trip right away. You can insure just the portion that you've paid right now, just the $5,000. You put that in as your trip costs. And then each time you make another payment, whether that's multiple payments each month or one more payment in that 45 day before the trip, then you go back to the insurance company and say, and I do this regularly, I just go to the TravelX website and I update my trip cost, and then they recalculate my premium. They say, you owe an extra $70 and I pay that. So that's my answer for you. That's how you can avoid paying more for insurance than you've already paid for the trip, and you won't have overinsured in case you have to cancel before you pay the balance. And then you said that you realized that you were going to give up certain coverages. We won't have to give up those coverages if you do that. So that's my tip to you.
That is excellent advice.
Anita says, I've not had to do a trip deposit as yet, but have put a small deposit on a hotel with a generous cancel policy. Does that hotel count as my initial deposit, or can I wait until I have to make a more extensive trip deposit? I know that when you're talking about a trip planned by a travel specialist, like someone on the WOW list, the insurance companies consider your first payment to be the first money that you put toward the cost of the trip. So some travel advisors may charge a $200 fee in order to start working with you, not necessarily people on the list, but there are advisors out there who have a fee, but which does not go toward the cost of the trip. It's a fee for their services. That doesn't count as your first trip payment. What counts is a payment that's covering your costs on the trip. Stan, do you have a direct answer to Anita's question?
Yeah, I mean I think what you said is correct. But let me just read this so I'm sure. To me, this sounds like the small deposit on the hotel would count as your first payment towards the trip. So that would start the clock ticking for a time-sensitive benefit.
Russell says, I have a Chase Sapphire Reserve card. Doesn't that provide some travel insurance? Yes. And as we said, know that there are going to be limitations. It may not be as much coverage as you want, but you can always add coverage onto whatever policy you've got. I think we covered annual plans. Diane also asked, many travel companies offer plans for their tour. Are those plans generally a good option? We have not really talked about a third party policy versus one offered by the travel company. Stan, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so it really depends on the plan that the travel company is offering. I've seen examples of incredibly expensive travel insurance plans as the sort of offered product that is just like way overpriced for the level of benefits. And then I've also seen tour operators, some big name tour operators that offer a really good set of coverages in their house plan. So it really depends on the who the tour operator is working with and what that plan looks like. It's generally one that is designed specifically for that tour operator. And so again, the best way to do that comparison is to see what they're offering, go to a comparison site and see what else is there, and then line up the benefits so you can do an apples to apples comparison.
I will add something to that, only because I just got back from a river cruise and I did something different. I did something different for my mom. I did something different, but for one of the people that was on it, the cruise line policy was excellent. Like, it looked excellent. And so we had her get the cruise line policy because of the cancellation things. There were just some advantages to doing that. But because we had done our own airfare and we tacked on our own, we didn't do the pre-cruise excursion through them and we didn't do the post-cruise excursion through them. We booked our own airfare and we booked our own hotels and our own activities for the pre and the post. And when I called to add the dates, because originally it was just for the cruise dates, when I called to basically expand that cruise line policy, I was unable to, because the excursions had not been booked through that third-party policy, was only for stuff that cruise line had booked. So I ended up actually doubling up her policy on travelinsurance.com just to cover the ground, like the extra days pre and the extra days post. So if you are going to take it out through the tour operator and you want to make alternate plans or your own plans, or, just call and ask an awful lot of questions, because my assumption was that I could just tack on costs and tack on days and pay more, but I wasn't allowed to. So always call and ask every question.
Okay, we're now kind of 15 minutes past our planned end time. See if we can maybe get.
I'm scrolling through the questions also here.
And again, remember, you feel free to, if we don't get to your question tonight, feel free to write to questions@WendyPerrin.com or to call travelinsurance.com or MedJet to ask them questions.
While you guys are scrolling, I'm just going to say, Justin and Olivia, it's been a while since I looked into annual policies, because I just really didn't find anything that had that, higher level. So thank you for noting that there are two that you found that do have limits that are more what I'm comfortable with. Learn something.
I've seen here a question for Sam, thoughts on world nomads for expats. I'm not familiar with their specific expat policies. I just know that they're, again, a very reputable company. We have worked with them in the past.
And Aaron wanted a little clarification about when you're most interested in the post-departure coverage, you can put in 0 for the amount. Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Get to the trip cost field, you just put in $0 and.
Yes. Not all providers are going to offer not all plans will show up in the results. But there are plenty that will. And sort of insider tip here, if you don't see the plan you're looking for with a 0 trip cost, then just put in, $100 as your trip costs, and you kind of get to the same place.
I do that all the time.
Well, I think we've kept
Okay. We still have a number of people hanging on here for more information, but again, as Brooke said, you're welcome to write to questions@WendyPerrin.com, and we'll do our best to answer all of your questions. I just want to say one last thing about my own. I've had a MedJet Horizon membership for the whole family for many years because it covers my kids. They're now in college in the US. They're traveling internationally on their own for a semester abroad or a summer abroad, but they're in the US normally. I still want them to be part of our family membership because if they should end up in a hospital on their college campus, I want to be the one to choose which hospital they're going to be in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
You
it's
can get
just
with
something to
everyone.
think about for the whole family, So anyway, again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Sherry, thank you so much for being here. And Stan, you guys
having
are
me.
awesome. You always are just such a fount of information. And it's been so helpful to our readers and listeners and followers. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And so we are going to be publishing this Zoom recording. For those of you who want to listen again or who missed part of it, we will be including this Zoom recording in an upcoming newsletter. So if you don't already receive our newsletter at WendyPerrin.com, be sure to sign up. It's easy to sign up. It's free. Just go to the homepage at WendyPerrin.com, scroll down to the bottom, and you can sign up for our newsletter. And that way you'll be able to see the Zoom recording. And also, as we say, if you have a question that didn't get answered tonight or another travel question, we're always at questions@WendyPerrin.com. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Travel safely.
Thank you.
Travels.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.